Exponent Philanthropy is the country's largest association of funders, nearly 2,200 members strong, and the only one dedicated to serving foundations with few or no staff, philanthropic families, and individual donors. A program director at Exponent Philanthropy. Exponent Philanthropy has been working with Youth Philanthropy Connect to plan this 4-part webinar today. We are recording this webinar and it will be made available to you after the program. Before we begin, a quick review of GoToWebinar technology. There are 2 parts to what you see on your screen. The viewer window is where you see these slides. You can resize the window by clicking and dragging the lower right corner or the zoom button. There's also the control panel, and that's the rectangular box along the side of your screen. The Grab tab lets you minimize the window so you can fully see the slides we'll be showing today. All webinar participants are muted, and we won't be using the raise your hand feature, but we still want to hear from you. And to do that, you can participate and submit questions in the questions pane. We encourage you to submit your questions all throughout the webinar, even as we're speaking, as they come to you, and we'll get to them in the Q&A section. Before we move on to today's presenters, I'd like to take a moment to highlight our program partner for this whole webinar series, Youth Philanthropy Connect. To do that, I'd like to invite Catherine Scott, who leads YPC, as they also call themselves, to say a few words about what they do and why they're partnering on educational content like today's webinar. Catherine?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Akila. Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Scott, and I'm so excited to be here on behalf of Youth Philanthropy Connect. Our mission is really to connect young people ages 8 to 21 engaged in grant making and the adults who support them. We connect them together to colleagues, to learning like we have today, and to tools and resources. And of course, we try to have a lot of fun while we're growing the movement of youth philanthropy. Today, you're getting to experience an awesome, amazing program, and we're so excited to partner with all of our speakers and Exponent Philanthropy on this webinar series. Throughout great opportunities like today, both in-person and remote learning, we try to provide great opportunities for youth and adults to learn together. You can get involved and attend our in-person gatherings and also invite youth to help lead YPC, where they can advise our work and plan great content like today and in-person events like our international conference. Sign up for our newsletter for more details, and we'll be sure to email out more about how to get involved after the webinar. And we're so excited to turn it over very shortly to amazing youth philanthropists and Carrie McCann, a grown-up youth philanthropist herself, for you to be able to hear even more.
Thanks, Catherine. Super helpful to know a little bit more about YPC. Where can people go to get more information on your offerings? I know we'll send the link after, but if you can just say it aloud now too.
Awesome. People can go to youthphilanthropyconnect.org. Again, that's youthphilanthropyconnect.org.
All right. Well, thank you. With that, I'd like to move on and introduce today's speakers. So first up, we have Carrie McCann. She's the president of the Iowa Council of Foundations, and like Catherine said, she's a grown-up youth philanthropist. She started as a youth grant maker at 14. Before joining the Iowa Council of Foundations, Carrie was the director of nonprofit partnerships and grant making at the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque. She earned an MA in Philanthropic Studies at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. As Catherine also mentioned, we have 2 youth philanthropists joining us today too, Michael Banwarth and Leah Freyhofer. They're both with Youth Area Philanthropists, or YAPers, and it's a project of the Community Foundation of Dubuque. Michael participates in the program's fundraising and grant making and serves as the grant making chair. He's currently a senior at Wahlert Catholic High School in Dubuque, and he hopes to pursue a career in music. Leah is a youth committee member at YAPers and has participated in the Foundation's grant programs. In her final year as a YAPer, Leah served as fundraising chair. She recently graduated from Wahlert High School, Catholic High School, and will be a freshman at St. Ambrose University in the fall. Carrie, can you take us from here?
Yes, thank you. I am really excited to be here virtually with all of you today for this webinar. I had the opportunity to share this presentation, or a version of this presentation, with adult leaders and some youth philanthropists at YPC conference in Indianapolis about a year ago, actually, right about this time. And Catherine invited me to share this story with a broader audience through this partnership between YPC and Exponent. So I'm really excited to be here. We're going to be talking about some lessons today around storytelling, really why storytelling is important, how to tell stories, and really what messages are important to be sharing as we think about youth philanthropy. And we're going to use a model that Disney has used and specifically Pixar has used in their storytelling that they do through movies. So Disney's model is really simple, and I think it's one that everyone can take back to their youth philanthropy programs, and I'm excited to share it with you here today. You can go ahead and hop to the next slide. I thought it would be helpful to share a little bit more about my story so you know who you're hearing from. It's been mentioned that I started my philanthropy career in 8th grade as a 14-year-old student. I joined a youth philanthropy group in my home county, and our acronym was YAC, probably the least attractive acronym there is. Our group was Youth Answering the Call of the Community, and we were funded by the DECO Foundation, which is based in northern Indiana. But my hometown is in southwest Iowa. So the DECO Foundation does this work in Iowa, Indiana, Minnesota, and Alabama. And I was just fortunate to be born in a county that has one of these programs. I fully immersed myself in the work for 5 years and had started to talk with one of my youth navigators about what I was going to study in college. And she said, well, you know, you could make this a career, right, Carrie? And I said, well, I hadn't really thought too much about it. I'd always said I wanted to be a teacher. But this work really is about teaching, and I get to do some of that in an informal way in my role today. So I went on to study nonprofit management at the University of Northern Iowa. And following that, I attended the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy at IUPUI in Indianapolis. And throughout my time there, I spent a lot of time interning and having part-time and graduate assistantships at nonprofits, but specifically at foundations. And I found a really great space for myself there because foundation work allows you to learn about a lot of different areas of interest and to make a small impact in each of those areas through funding nonprofit organizations. So found a great fit there and was applying for jobs after graduation and landed at the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque and absolutely loved my work there. And probably the most fulfilling part of that job for me was reconnecting with youth philanthropy and serving in that adult role. So I had the opportunity to work with Leah and Michael through the Yappers program, and I'm anxious for you to hear their stories later today. And really everything came full circle for me. So it's been a great opportunity to connect in that way. And now I'm working at the Iowa Council of Foundations, and we support youth philanthropy across the state, and I'm still engaged nationally through the DECO Foundation in supporting youth philanthropy across all the states that they serve. So happy to be here. We can go ahead and move on to the next slide. So you might be wondering, why I took that time out to tell you this story. Well, every person has a story to tell, and all of those stories deserved to be heard. My story was personal. I'm hoping that it helped you learn a little bit more about who I am and that it demonstrated my commitment to philanthropy. But probably most important, it helped to build some credibility so you know where I'm coming from and that I do have years of experience in this youth philanthropy space and also this storytelling space. So wanted to take some time to do that. Now we'll go ahead and transition into more of the content of what we're going to talk about today. We can move on to the next slide. The youth philanthropy story is really a big story to tell. It's not just about your specific youth philanthropy organization or just my personal story about my journey through youth philanthropy. There's lots of benefits of youth philanthropy programming. First, it's about education, teaching young people what philanthropy is, what a nonprofit is, how to serve on a board, how to make grants, how to understand community needs and figure out problems and solutions to help solve those problems. Youth philanthropy is about youth development and youth leadership, and it's also about youth empowerment and helping students to gain those leadership skills so they can apply them in high school, on into college, and then in their adult lives. Our young people are making a difference in their community, and youth philanthropy is a great story to tell because it's telling about kids doing good in their community. And I know in my hometown newspaper, if you read about kids, it wasn't always reading about good things that kids had going on in the community. So it's nice to report out the positive impact that young people are making in our communities through youth philanthropy. And then probably most importantly for our organization, the Iowa Council of Foundations, youth philanthropy work is about grooming our next generation of leaders, about grooming community leaders, new board members, and also encouraging young people to think charitably and transition into donors once they have that discretionary income. So all of those things are stories that you can tell when you maybe are starting a youth philanthropy program about what the benefits might be, but also as you're talking with your board of directors, maybe some potential donors, about how they can get connected into your youth philanthropy work. Next slide, please. I mentioned that you might have to talk with your board about why they should be investing in a youth philanthropy program. There are so many success stories, and the DECO Foundation actually has a great alumni study that shows some of those success stories. I'd be happy to connect you with that resource if you'd like. But you can mention a lot of those things I just shared. Why investing in youth philanthropy is really investing in young people and investing in future leaders. Other stories that you might tell as you think about youth philanthropy and promoting your specific youth philanthropy group would be why a student decided to join and what the experience has meant to them. We'll hear some of those stories later. It can help you tell stories about the needs in your community and the ways that young people are addressing those needs. Grant impact stories are really important stories to tell. We'll also hear a couple of those later in our examples. You'll want to share in your storytelling how students can get involved and how donors can help support your work. And finally, it's an opportunity and a platform for your students to talk about what they've learned. I know that I tell that story over and over again as I talk about transitioning into youth philanthropy and then into my career. It's one that you need to practice and continue to tell over and over again what you've benefited from the experience. I wanted to share a video with you from the DECO Foundation's FISH group, and FISH stands for Philanthropic Ideas, Strategy, and Heart. I've been a part of the FISH group for a number of years. I just transitioned off of that board a year ago, but this video is really an inspiring one to watch. So we'll tune into that and then I'll pop back on.
Investing in young people's healthy development so they can live lives of economic freedom. What does that mean? Well, that they produce more than they consume. What a great reason to learn about the field of philanthropy.
About 5 years ago, we decided that if we really wanted to grow young people, we needed to put them in the driver's seat. We get them together a couple times a year, and they're our think tank, they're our leaders.
Philanthropy, or sharing your time, talent, and treasure for positive community change, isn't a natural trait. It's something that's learned. So at the foundation, we think about what young people developmentally need. It's getting out in the community, meeting people, knowing the movers and shakers, and becoming one themselves.
I'd say the one word that describes my youth philanthropy experience would be life-changing. My parents had always brought me up to try to do good things for other people, and it was always instilled in me. But once I got into youth philanthropy, it changed the course of my life, and my career set up just to be in nonprofit work for the rest of my life.
We do various projects like granting, community service, things like this. Youth philanthropy is about other people, it's not about myself. It's about how are they doing, how is their performance, how is their, anything and everything.
It was a blessing. I was in a place that was just really negative, and then when I got into that environment and I got to focus on helping other people, I started not focusing on myself as much, and it was so rewarding.
I would say my youth philanthropy experience was really transformative. Being a mayor of a community of 9,000 people, Without my youth philanthropy experience, I would not have the passion for my community. Seeing how individuals make our community a better place, really is impactful and has helped me personally kind of put those things forward.
My youth philanthropy experience made a huge difference on where I am today. During my youth philanthropy experience, I had a lot of different caring adults who made an impact on my life. When I got to my youth philanthropy experience, it gave me a word for the thing that I wanted to be when I grew up.
At the DECO Foundation, we're all about young people having the developmental experiences they need when they need them. So teaching philanthropy allows us to walk the talk of youth development.
I love that video because it seems really scripted, but it's not. We didn't ask the students to say those things, but I think that their statements and their stories are really powerful messages to share. So I hope you all enjoyed that video. And I think that the DECO Foundation has really built a great model for youth philanthropy work. And the FISH group specifically is designed to take students who want to dive a little deeper or swim a little deeper, as they say, into youth philanthropy and become trainers themselves. So they bring those young people together. The young people are then sent out to the states that they serve to train and help support other youth philanthropy students across the states that they serve. So it's a really powerful program. If you'd like to learn more about that, let me know and I'd be happy to connect you with the DECO folks. And those stories, I think, are the dream of what you want to happen with youth philanthropy students. If they get excited to a point where they're considering making it a career, or they get excited to a point where they know even if they don't choose a nonprofit career, they can continue to be involved in their communities and can continue to be involved in philanthropy in a variety of ways. So I'm happy to share that video. It's one of my favorite youth philanthropy clips and resources that we have. So now we've talked about a little bit of the type of story that you might be able to tell, and now I want to share why it's important to tell stories. Most importantly, our brains are wired for storytelling. When you're in a conversation with someone and they begin to tell a story, you start to feel excited, you form connections with them, and your brain fires signals that helps you connect the story that you're hearing to your own personal experiences and passions and interests. So, our brains are hardwired for it, and that's why storytelling has become really important in philanthropy these last several years. Storytelling is important to demonstrate your impact, to start to engage new people in your work, and also to help people remember who your organization is and what you're hoping to accomplish in your community. The Yappers are going to share some stories about specific programs that we do throughout the year, and the Yappers have become successful in being known for those programs. So when people hear about the Feed the Need event, they automatically connect that in their brains to Yappers and to the Community Foundation. So that consistency is really key. And finally, telling stories, the ultimate goal is really to inspire action. And I think it's a good note here to make sure that you stay really focused in your storytelling, so you're not asking people to do 10 things at the end of your story. They have one specific call to action, and having that primary goal will really help you craft a more dynamic story. Next slide, please. Groundwire has put together this engagement pyramid, and I think it is important to look at because it demonstrates that you can't just tell one story and reach your goal. You have to be consistent, you have to stay in front of people, you have to tell a variety of stories, and you have to use a variety of formats to tell those stories. And if you click to the next slide, I'll just show you here how someone might progress up that engagement pyramid. This would be an example of a student who's hearing a story. They might first hear about Yappers, for example, by reading a story that one of their friends shared on Facebook or seeing it in a newspaper ad. So at that point, they're in this observation phase. After that, they might decide to subscribe to the Yappers e-newsletter. So they're beginning to follow the work of the Yappers. then they might get an email and see something that's of interest to another one of their friends and forward that email along. Then they become an endorsement for the Yappers program because they're helping to spread the word. Or they might make a small gift to one of the Yappers fundraisers. After that, they might understand the program to a point where they're ready to become actively involved and join the Yappers program in the organization. Once they have become a contributing member of the organization, they start to really own the work. And this is exactly what happened to me when I was in my YAC program. I joined the first year. I spent time contributing and learning about the organization, and then I decided to become one of the committee chairs. I wanted to get that deeper commitment, and that's the owning process. And both of the Yappers that you'll hear from today have definitely transitioned through all the stages in this pyramid, which is why I've asked them to share their stories with you. And then finally, that leading experience in serving on a committee or being a committee chair, maybe the president of the organization. So I think that's a great tool to use as you craft your messages, but it's also a great way to manage your members and see who is where on this pyramid, and it can be a helpful tool for you to identify leaders within your organization. So I wanted to share that with you. Next slide, please. So now we know why we tell stories and a little bit about the type of stories that we tell, but how do we get these messages across? And this is where Disney is going to help us out. So this next slide here shows you Pixar's storytelling approach, and it's really quite simple. The next slide, please. It's a simple format that reads, once upon a time, there was blank, every day, blank, then one day, blank, because of that, blank, because of that, blank, until finally, blank. So right now, it's not a great story. We need to fill in those gaps. And on the next slide, you'll see a photo of one of my favorite Disney Pixar movies, Finding Nemo. Really relevant, again, since Finding Dory is now out. And I'm going to use the Finding Nemo story and plug in those pieces to help you see how the model works. So in the next slide, you'll read, and I'm just going to read the story for you. Once upon a time, there was a widowed fish named Marlin who was extremely protective of his only son, Nemo. Every day, Marlin warned Nemo of the ocean's dangers and implored him not to swim far away. Then one day, in an act of defiance, Nemo ignores his father's warnings and swims into the open water. Because of that, he is captured by a diver and ends up in the fish tank of a dentist in Sydney. Because of that, Marlin sets off on a journey to recover Nemo, enlisting the help of other sea creatures along the way, until finally Marlin and Nemo find each other, reunite, and learn that love depends on trust. So you have, a 2-hour movie that's really based on this one simple paragraph, and you can craft your own stories in really simple ways and then find effective channels and effective ways to tell those stories. So on the next slide, I have an example of how you could use that with your youth philanthropy group. And the example here is, of course, Yappers, because that's what I'm sharing about today. So once upon a time, kids were not engaged in the youth community. For many years, adults complained that kids were not doing anything to improve their community. Then one day, the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque created Yappers, the youth area philanthropists. Because of that, kids began learning about philanthropy, until finally, they began problem solving and making grants to nonprofits in their community. Again, a very simple formula that puts together a really quick story for you to tell about your youth philanthropy program. So that example is how Yappers got started. There's a number of other ways that you could plug information in about your youth philanthropy group to tell stories in different ways. So there's a tool for you that you can take back to your work today. Now I want to talk about how you find and identify the right stories to tell. One thing that's really important is to open your mind to stories. Stories can be everywhere. Sometimes when we were at the Community Foundation, we'd hear a quick staff update from someone about a program or project. And our communications director was so savvy that she would jot herself a note, and in less than a week, that would be turned into a blog post or a story that was highlighted on our website. So sometimes we overthink this storytelling process, but it really can be quite simple. So just always have your ears open and your mind open to stories that are available. Quality is really more important than quantity, and I say that because if you're focused on quantity, you might be sort of scrounging for stories, and the stories may not be as impactful as they could be. So once you get a quality story, repurpose that story. Continue to tell it over and over again and use different formats to do that. One of my favorite stories about nonprofit work, not necessarily directly related to youth philanthropy, but one that's been meaningful to me, is the organization that I used to work with worked in homelessness prevention and rehousing. One of their clients who came in really off the streets, had no resources and no housing, applied to their program, got utility assistance, was able to secure an apartment, and 2 years later he had secured a full-time job and came back to the organization and said that he wanted to give back to the organization for all they've done for him. So they engaged him, and he is now a board member for the organization. Talk about an awesome story that you want everyone to know about, that level of engagement you've had with a client. And his name was Larry, and so I encouraged them to tell the Larry story over and over and over again, and that's exactly what they did. I read it in their newsletter, I saw it on their Facebook, and then they invited Larry to come to their annual dinner, and he shared the story personally. So you don't have to rethink new stories every single month or every single week. Once you have a good story, just repurpose that and use it again. An interview can be a really helpful strategy to uncover some stories, and that's sort of what we're doing with Michael and Leah today. I gave them a few questions to think about, and they're going to share their responses. So I'll demonstrate the process of uncovering the story. After we hear from them, I'll respond and share some tips on how you can do that. Finally, a little bit of information about what to say. Make sure you're using words that are easy to understand. There's tools that you can use if you're writing a blog post or a story for your newsletter to make sure that the reading level is at a first grade level is what is recommended. And having that easy to read message is a way to keep your audience engaged. If you're using fluffy words, sometimes the reader gets lost. So keep it simple there, and also be concise. We know that we have people's attention for a very short amount of time, so as short as it can be is best. And I've already mentioned this, but I wanted to reiterate, focus on one main point per story. You don't want to overwhelm your reader or your audience, and end with that one specific call to action. So I have one final video to show you before we turn it over to our yappers, and it's actually a quick preview of both of our students, since they are both highlighted in this video. So here you can learn a little bit more about yappers and what the program has meant to these young people.
YAPPERS is an acronym which stands for Youth Area Philanthropists, and it's Youth Area Philanthropists in the Dubuque area. We give out grants, so we take in money, and then at the end of the year we decide where we're going to distribute this money back out into the community.
We actually have $6,000 to give out this year, and that was raised through youth-led funding.
We have two major fundraisers throughout the year. One of them is the Feed the Need Lunch-In, and the other one is with the Community Foundation Block Party.
All of us yappers call around and get everything donated. We get the food donated, and we have coffee that's donated to our own hands and our time to go out and ask donors to give, and then we run the whole event. We set it up, we serve the food, we clean it up. So it's all youth driven, and it's all of us who really want to help, and that's why we're there. My favorite story was going to the YMCA and sitting in with one of their directors on a site visit from the money we provided them a year ago. And she showed us the breakdown of where the funds have gone, and then she started talking to us about the different stories, the smiles on their faces, and she wished that we could have been there to see how excited one of these little girls was, because her dream was to go to gymnastics class, and it just wasn't going to work for her family to afford that. But our funds gave her a couple weeks of gymnastics lessons,
Really, the way that a community functions is that everyone has to give to allow everyone else to succeed. The cool thing about Yappers is that everything here is long-lasting because it builds upon itself. It's sustainable. So Yappers provides this base for everyone to grow off of and to grow closer as a community.
Great. So as you can see in the video, the Yappers were awarded the Outstanding Youth in Philanthropy Award recently from a local organization. And this video really just highlights the great work that they do each year to help young people in our community. And so I've asked Leah and Michael to come here today to talk with you a little bit about what Yappers has meant to them, and also to tell you a little bit more about the two specific programs that we've mentioned, Feed the Need and then our grant making work. I think that this will hopefully give you some ideas to take back to your youth philanthropy work, but it'll also be a good exercise for us in storytelling. So we have the technology set up to do a little webcam with you. So I'm going to turn that on right now, make sure we're focused in. Okay, great. There's our young people right there. So I'm first going to turn it over to Leah, and she'll be talking with you about our Feed the Need event.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Leah Freihofer, and as I said earlier, I just graduated from Wahlert. I've been a Yapper for 2 years, and this past year I served on the board as the fundraising chair. So I really enjoy being part of Yappers, and I was really excited when I was asked to help out today and discuss our Feed the Need event. And that is actually our biggest fundraiser that we host each year. It's an annual event that Yappers has done every year since they have begun. And we mostly do it to raise money, but we also raise a lot of awareness as we do the event each year. We hold it in the Roshek building, which is where the Foundation of Greater Dubuque is held, and so we do that in their lobby. So there's a lot of offices there. We're able to invite a lot of people that way. And we also are able to invite a lot of people by calling out, because we get everything that we have there donated. As I spoke about in the video, we get the food donated, there's a silent auction, and we have to call all of those businesses personally. So we take the time out to do this ourselves, and we just really enjoy what we do. This event raises money because of the luncheon and the silent auction, but also the awareness that there is need in our community, our Feed the Need event. The money goes 100% back into the grants that we give out. There's nothing that is kept. Every dollar that is earned that day is worked for and is also given straight back to the need in our community. And we really love this event because we are able to raise awareness. We like to leave the empty bowls out on the tables that show that there is poverty in our community right here, those that don't get enough to eat, those who don't have the resources to go out and find another job or get their children to school with a good meal in them and things like that. So the money that we raise really goes right back into our grants. One of my favorite stories from Feed the Need was this past year. I attended the event and I stayed later to help with the cleaning up portion of everything. So we were moving tables, we were taking things down, and one man came down the stairs, most likely from his office up in the Roshek building somewhere, and he looked around and he said, well, what's left? And we said, what do you mean? And he said, well, the silent auction wasn't all sold, was it? What's left? So we went over to the table and we showed him a couple different things. There was a spa package and maybe an oil change and some random things, and he said, I'll take it all. So he went over to the ATM and he got out enough cash to buy every silent auction item that was left, and he completely did it with no question. I mean, sometimes it's hard to just throw out over $100, but he had no question. He knew that the money was going to a very good organization and right back into the community, and maybe he was going to give the spa package as a gift to his wife or something like that. But it was really cool to see him do that without any question, and to ask us even further about how well the event went. And then we were able to share with him more about what Yappers is and what we do. We also get to share that when we do all the calling for the donating and things. So it's a really great awareness event and fundraising event for the Yappers, and we all absolutely love doing it.
Great, thank you, Leah. I have actually never heard that story that Leah just told, so that was really an exciting one for me. And again, she was looking for a story at the event. You probably wouldn't have predicted that a story could come from a donor that way, but she just captured that and retold it in a powerful way that demonstrated that donors are aware of the Yappers community in Dubuque and that they're willing to contribute in any way that they can to help support the mission. So really great, Leah. Thanks so much for sharing that. And now I'll turn it over to Michael, and he's going to talk with you about our grant-making program.
All right. Hi, everyone. Like Carrie said, I'm Michael Banwarth, and this next coming year will be my third and final year in Yappers. And this past year, I was able to serve as the grant-making chair, which was really cool. So I'd just like to take you through our personal grant-making process a little bit. Every year, Yappers fundraises and receives donations for a really money. Like Leah said, I think this year it was a little over $6,000, which is really great, especially for a youth program. And through the process of grant making, we're able to redistribute, it's a really important term, which I'll come back to later, all of that money back into the community. And I know it's fairly common to philanthropy, and we've mentioned it a couple times before, but I'm going to talk a little bit about redistribution because it's what drew me to Yappers in the first place. I was in a few different service clubs, and I heard about Yappers, and I was like, okay, this sounds like a great opportunity, but I'm really busy. Do I have time for this? Is it something that I really want to devote my Sunday evenings to? And then I heard about this idea of redistribution because Yappers focuses so much on the monetary side of giving treasure as well as time and talent. And it's such a cool thought, in my opinion, like I kind of touched upon in the video, that everything is from the community and to the community. So it's a way that we make our own community stronger, and that's really important for everyone to learn about within the community. So every year, we come up with a number of different guidelines for our grants, and then we post them up on our website for different organizations to look at. That's really important, I think, for both them and for us, because it allows us to know exactly what we're looking for. Because you have to realize when people send in grant applications, they're all good. I mean, there aren't really usually many applications where you don't want to give them money. Of course, we'd love to give everyone money, but you have to kind of pare that down into a few places that you'd really like to give to hopefully see that succeed and see something grow from the money that we're going to grant. And it's also really helpful to have guidelines for the community because the nonprofits can word their programs in a way that makes them applicable to the grants that we're hoping to give, and then it also helps us to understand on a personal level really what they're doing with their programs. So once we have our guidelines, we get in a bunch of different applications, I think usually around 30 or so, and the group gets online and goes through each application individually. And that part is, for me at least, it's usually the hardest bit because I love all the applications. I mean, this year especially, there were so many really good initiatives, and going through and you have to just low score some of them so that other ones come to the top. And then actually this year I went through like 3 times and redid everything because I couldn't decide. But then you get together and have a meeting where everyone just starts throwing out ideas and throwing out suggestions for who we should fund and who really deserves money and who might make some really good progress in our community. And hopefully in 1 or 2 meetings, this year it was 2, you'll come to a consensus and be able to distribute the money in a way that is really positive and really makes an impact. Something that I also like to touch on, I was able to work with the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque's Impact Grant Committee, which is made up of adults besides myself. And I had really expected the process to be very different because, I mean, it's adults, and I thought it would be more streamlined, more impressive in a way. But really, what I found is that Yappers does everything that adult groups do. The process was really the exact same thing, even though we were working with a little bit more funding. And that was really interesting to me because I found out that we're really doing what an adult community foundation is doing. It's the same idea of getting money from donations and fundraising and then redistributing it. So that was really eye-opening to me, and I think it helped me to see how we're really being able to take initiative and take leadership in our community. So Obviously, I have one more year left in high school, and then I'm not sure what I want to do after that. I know I'm going to go probably into music, so I'm not sure how that'll relate to philanthropy, but I know that even if I don't go into a specifically philanthropic career, I can still make whatever career I end up in philanthropic. That's one of the things that I learned from Yappers, is that since philanthropy is really as simple as just giving of the resources you have back to your community to make it a better place, it's really easy to be a philanthropist in every stage and every point of your life. Thanks so much.
Ah, don't you just love him? I do. I'm going to turn off the webcam now because we're going to pop back over to some slides. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Michael. A couple things that I think I want to highlight from what Michael told you. The redistribution concept is something that a lot of my classmates didn't even start to understand until they were in grad school. So Michael's way ahead of the curve there, and that's something that we teach in our very first intro lesson, the very first night we convene the Yappers each year. So really excited to hear that he's held on to that lesson. Another thing that Michael was talking about is his career trajectory, and I mentioned that even if people aren't fully invested in a nonprofit career, they can make this a part of their adult life. And I know that the large majority of our Yappers have done that in really unique ways, and I can also speak to some of the other DECO Foundation alums that they are doing that as well. And then finally, I think his note about the fact that they're doing the exact same things that our adult board grant-making committee members are doing is a key lesson that young people, once they transition out of youth philanthropy, are immediately ready to step onto professional boards. And that's a great case to build with your board of directors as well. So thanks so much, you two. We're going to turn our webcam back on in a little bit and do some Q&A, but I did want to share one more tool with you. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. Just a quick list and some ideas of where you can share your story, obviously in print materials, but online stories can be shared in a variety of different ways. You can post them on your website, you can share them via social media, you can have a blog post linking to additional stories, and all of those things can talk and interact with each other. So again, don't be afraid to repurpose a story in new ways. Video has been a really important thing for the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque. We have a really talented staffer who puts some quality things together. And those videos last forever. You always have an archive of those videos, and they can be pulled back out at any time. You can use the stories that you already have at your events. So we always showed videos at the Community Foundation's annual luncheon. We have had speakers at the luncheon as well. There's even different platforms to use within specific events that you can tell a variety of different stories in engaging ways. And then obviously in person. And that last tool I wanted to give you is just a little template to put an elevator speech together. So most people are familiar with elevator speeches, but just a quick run through. The next slide is detailing out what an elevator speech is. So it's telling about the why, it's telling about the problem or the opportunity, the solution, and then the request. So here's a little bit more detail on those. And we'll use a youth philanthropy example. So the why does youth philanthropy, or why does this youth philanthropy group exist, is to engage young people in our community. And you can go ahead and click on to the next slide. The problem or the opportunity is that there are many issues facing our young people. The solution is that youth philanthropy grants help to make a difference, and the request might be that a donor could get involved by making a gift. So there's a quick example of how you can craft a simple elevator speech, and crafting that message can be done in 6 easy steps, and this is the tool I think you can take back on the next slide. So step 1 is to really write down everything that comes to mind when you think of your youth philanthropy group. Step 2 is to cut out all of the jargon and the really nitty-gritty details and make strong, short, and powerful sentences. Step 3 is to connect those phrases to each other. Step 4 is to memorize those key points and practice. Step 5 is to remember what's in it for me. What do you want to tell your listener? How can they benefit from either learning more or becoming engaged in your program? And then step 6 is to create different versions of that elevator speech for different audiences. So this is something that we do with the Yappers each year. It's really talk with them about crafting their own elevator speech about the Yappers' work and the organization. So they're prepared to talk with people at Feed the Need. They're prepared to talk with organizations and businesses that they're contacting about in-kind donations or donations for the silent auction. And they're really prepared to tell their own personal story about how they've been engaged in youth philanthropy and connected to the work. So I think it's a really simple tool, but a really powerful one. And toward the end of a student's time in youth philanthropy, it becomes important for them to be able to have an elevator speech about the impact the program had on their life and the skills and abilities that they developed in the program that makes them a good college candidate or scholarship applicant. And that's something that we work on at the end of the year as well. So another tool that you can take back to your organization as well. So now I want to open it up for questions. It looks like we have about 10 minutes, so that's great. And Michael, Leah, and I are all sharing the same office. So we're going to reposition our camera here so we can maybe all be on the same video. Oh, great, we did it. Look at that. All right, and here's our phone, so hopefully you can still hear us. So we're open for any questions. You can put those in through the chat box, and then I think Akila's going to maybe read some of those out for us.
That's right. Okay, so I encourage everyone to get your questions in so that before we have to wrap up. So enter them into your chat box now. To get us started, I guess I have a question for you, and maybe you all can answer. Like, can you give us a time where a story like really had a huge impact on like what you were trying to do? And it could be like Leah's story about a donor giving, something that worked with a donor. Just like, can you give us an example of what it might look like in action?
Sure. I guess it's probably the same one that I shared in the video that was showed earlier because it is probably both of our favorites.
Yep.
We both were able to go to this visit through the YMCA here in Dubuque. We had given them a grant last year. We also gave them one this year because we love what they do in the community. And so they shared with us about the money that we had given had gone to help their mentor program. So at the Y, they have mentors with a lot of their students that attend really often, and those mentors can help them with homework and things like that, but also take them out to do different activities and teach them different life skills through the activities that they go and do in the community. So we gave to that program to help them do just a little bit extra during the summer, more fun things to do with their mentor. So they shared with us this story about a younger girl who had always wanted to do gymnastics, and her family had recently been through some tough times, and it just wasn't in their budget to give her gymnastics lessons. And so the funds that we gave allowed her to do some weeks of gymnastics during the summer, and she told us that she wished that we had been there to see the smile on her face, the smile on the other kids' faces. There were a couple other stories that really touched us, and to me that made it all the better to start up again with the second year of Yappers, since that was my first year, and really work hard to raise even more money so that we can make more people smile.
Mm-hmm. It's like using the story as an inspiration. Sorry, Michael, please, go ahead.
No, you're good. One of the other stories which I found really cool was that there was a boy involved in the program who had been very into video games. They kind of described him as a couch potato, probably didn't have a supportive home life, didn't really get out at all, kind of was really just immersed in this technology. And what they did was, instead of trying to be like, no, you have to find a different thing to do with your life, they really embraced that and got him into 3D printing, which was really cool to me, because I know last I spoke to them, he was kind of looking at different outlets that might allow him to use this love of technology. Now, with 3D printing, there's a lot of things that you can now make to help people and to really engage in your community. So that was a cool way that they really took something that he was good at and showed him a way to plug that into the community. And I think that's what Yappers is all about, is about those connections.
I love that.
Great.
Necessarily a grant story, but just a youth philanthropy story that's been really meaningful to me these past couple months. I helped coordinate a statewide youth philanthropy conference in April. And while we were there, I had a former Yapper attend, and she joined her freshman year. It was her first year, and it was also my first year working with the Yappers program. And she was very shy, not eager to speak up in the meetings. And I wasn't quite sure what youth philanthropy was going to mean for her throughout her high school career. So she continues to be involved. She's a junior this year. And while we were sitting and having a conversation, she told me that she was considering a nonprofit career and studying nonprofit management in college. I mean, talk about heartwarming for me. It really helped this young person open up and break out of her shell. And now I've heard from Jenna, who oversees the program now, is really actively engaged in the program and is a contributing member of the youth philanthropy group. So it can just be so powerful for young people who maybe haven't had a chance to step up into leadership positions, and this gives them a platform to do that, and now she's making it a career. So that's been meaningful for me.
Wow, yeah, it's a huge impact. We have a question from a participant, Sam, and Sam asks, what are common storytelling mistakes that are easily avoided? And maybe, Carrie, if you'll start.
Sure.
Put you right on the spot.
I touched on this a few times in the presentation. I think one common mistake is trying to do too much in one story. And the communications director at the Community Foundation was so talented at this. She could take an entire interview and pull out the nuggets and craft it into this beautiful story that had one main point and one call to action at the end. So if you want to get on the Community Foundation's website and look at the annual report or any of the videos that they produce, that would be a great resource for you. I think another common storytelling mistake is thinking that it just has to be this magical, over-the-top story and super perfect, and it has to be how everything, gelled and aligned. And that's not always what a good story is. A great story could be about a not-so-great grant that your youth philanthropy group made and what your students learned from that experience. So, overthinking it to a point where you aren't having your eyes open to all the stories that are there, I would say is a common mistake. Right. Anything you guys want to add?
Sure. I completely agree.
Yeah, I would just say one of the things is, good question, by the way, thanks. Is just to look at it and see what you're passionate about, because you always tell the best stories when you really care about what you're talking about. So I know, like at Feed the Need or at different Yapper functions, I'll immediately start talking to people about the stories that I care about or the things that I really care about, because I know I've had people say to me before, you really care about this, don't you? You really sound passionate about it. And I think that connects with people. So latch onto those things which you really feel like you can talk to people about, that you really care about, because then it just makes it feel more like you. You don't have to change into this different storyteller when you're telling a story. You just have to be yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Great point. Should have had that as a slide.
That's a great point. So just kind of speaking or riffing off passion, someone just asked, like, how do you advertise the Feed the Needs lunch? And it was Katie, not Catherine Scott, but another Katie on the call, on the webinar. And she said, has it been successful from year one, and how has it grown over the years? It just seems like such a great idea and a way to raise money and awareness.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll talk about a little bit of the history of the program, and then I'll have Michael and Leah talk about some of the efforts that they do to help promote the event. So Feed the Need had historically been in March, which is Hunger Awareness Month, and we found some challenges in scheduling and getting the young people there to work the event because it happened to fall during spring break time. So we transitioned the event, and now it's in the fall over their fall break, and that just seems to work a lot better. We also used to do it more as a formal sit-down luncheon, and I think that worked for a couple years, but then we wanted it to be more accessible to more community members. So it actually has transitioned into sort of a grab-and-go type lunch where people can come in, eat rather quickly, if you will, like a drop-in event, and then be on their way with the rest of their day. So hosting it downtown in the Roshek building, which is right in the heart of downtown Dubuque, really allows easy access for folks who are working in downtown buildings to get to the event. And it's just a beautiful building and allows enough space to host the event and the silent auction all in one visible place for everyone who's walking through the event. I would say that as with any event, there's definitely tweaks and changes that are made each year, and we have fine-tuned it these last couple years that I worked on it, and then this past year that Jenna helped support it, I'm sure she made some adjustments as well. So just learning from year to year what people are interested in, what draws a crowd, what maybe doesn't work well, and making those adjustments moving forward has been the approach for Feed the Name. And then I'll let them talk about the marketing piece.
Sure, yeah. We do a couple different things. We have posters that are printed out, and we take time out of our schedules to go and hang those up at different locations downtown, or maybe ask your parents to take one to work, things like that. Especially if they work in a downtown location, that's really helpful. We also wrap little labels around soup cans that we put on all the tables that are in the Roshek building, because there are a couple of restaurants there, and there's in lobby area of the Roshek building. So we put those soup cans or just little signs on every single table that's there, so people that often come to the Roshek building for lunch the couple weeks before will see that and realize that there's a luncheon coming up that they can attend, so that's really good. And then also, as I spoke of before, when we call the different locations asking for the donations of the food and especially the silent auction items, since the silent auction items depend solely on the students calling, we have to kind of give our little elevator speech when we talk to them, because they're not just going to give a donation for no reason. We have to explain what Yappers is and what we do, and that it's going to a really good cause. So we are able to tell multiple businesses in our area about a great way that they can give back to the community, and how we are kind of that middleman in there for them.
Right. I would say just networking too. I mean, just among students, this year I had a bunch of my friends come down, and some of them brought their families, and I mean, that's 20, 30 extra people who are coming through and buying the meal and just talking to other people. And I think it's all about, I keep coming back to that idea of community, because I think it's so central. But I mean, you tell someone, they tell someone, they tell someone else, and it spreads like wildfire.
Yeah, and it really has grown. In just the 2 years, I know we raised a significant amount of money this year than we did the first year that I was there, and I think that's because of what Michael said. There are more people that are telling their friends and their family members, because the first year I didn't really know that much of what it was, and so then the next year I was like, Mom, you should go to this, like, bring your friends. I know I saw a couple of my other friends and their parents down there, so that was cool.
And as the event has grown, Yappers membership has also grown, which is great. I think Jenna just messaged me last week and told me there's close to 40 applicants this year, which is amazing. And some other more traditional marketing things that we do, the Community Foundation sends e-blasts to their list of contacts and donors. They also promote it on social media. And we haven't done too much paid advertising around it, but there would be an opportunity to do that as well. So really just overall a positive event, and it's well known by community members at this point.
All right, well, thanks for that. We it looks like we're right up at 3 o'clock, so I want to wrap up, but thank you all, like Carrie, Michael, Leah, like, thanks so much for joining us today. I want to encourage you, like, we have Carrie's contact information right here, but if you have other questions, like, please feel free to reach out to me or to Carrie, and we'll get an answer for you. I also want to thank, again, Youth Philanthropy Connect for partnering with us on the webinar series. We thank you, like our participants, for joining us today, and we invite you to join us for 2 additional programs that we have coming up. They're in August and October, and here's the information. For both programs, registration is open now, so you can register today. We'd also invite you to save the date for our national conference, and registration is open for this as well. We'll be in Chicago in September 26th through the 28th, and again, registration is open now. Finally, to encourage openness in the field and accelerate effective philanthropy, we are doing a Philanthropy Lessons, and we ask our members and other kinds of grant makers to submit a paragraph or 2 that summarizes the lesson, their philanthropy lesson, something they've learned, and we'll ready it for posting. So it's very easy to do. If you prefer, you can submit your lesson as an attachment to lessons@exponentphilanthropy.org, or tweet about it with the hashtag here, MyPhilLesson. We'll share additional resources on this topic after the webinar, as well as the recording and the slides from today. In the meantime, we invite you to stay connected with us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Here's the information for each platform. And thanks again for taking the time to participate. The webinar